You know what your problem is?
I ain't got no problem, man. Don't tell me. Don't tell me what my problem is.
While the cameras were rolling to capture the latest chapter in a season that had already seen its share of explosive moments, no one, not even the season crew, could have predicted the raw intensity that would unfold when Scrappy and Khaotic were thrown into the same scene. What was supposed to be just another scripted confrontation quickly escalated into a fiery clash, one that would leave the cast and the audience shocked. The Love and Hip Hop Atlanta set was electric, charged with the kind of tension only reality TV could bring. It was a different kind of day for Scrappy, who had been dealing with a lot of personal pressure lately, including family issues, relationship drama, and the constant spotlight of the show. However, it wasn't just the typical stress that had Scratch on edge today. It was Khaotic and Khaotic. The brash newcomer had been stirring things up ever since he joined the show, known for his sharp tongue and even sharper attitude, and he had no problem picking fights, especially if it meant winning attention. After years of being in the spotlight, Scrappy wasn't impressed by Khaotic's antics, but something about the way Khaotic had been challenging him lately, making fun of him, and trying to get under his skin had been driving Scrappy crazy. The tension between the two men had been growing for weeks, during which time Khaotic had been subtly destroying Scrappy's reputation by making fun of his previous relationships and making fun of his position in the love and hip-hop circles. Scrappy had tried to ignore it, but today he couldn't contain it any longer. The scene began innocently enough. The producers had set up a confrontation between them. When the cameras rolled, the two men thought it would be just another verbal sparring session, but Chaz went right on the attack, his voice dripping with mockery. "You've been on this show for how long, and you still don't know how to handle your business?" Chaz's words were like daggers aimed at Scrappy's pride, and his smirk only made things worse by giving him the look of someone who was eager to provoke a reaction. Scrappy's jaw clenched, and his patience was beginning to wear thin. He had been trying to remain composed, but Chael's constant taunting was beginning to get to him. Conflict averse, but this was unique, man. You need to be careful what you say. Khaotic wasn't just discussing his relationships or personal life. He was also disparaging his identity and reputation on the program, and Scrappy wasn't going to let that. Though his voice was low, Scrappy's was warning. Disorganized, of course, wasn't one to back down. Instead, he pushed harder. "Watch my mouth now. I'm just saying it like I see it. You're not built like you were, Scrappy. You're just another washed-up guy acting like he's still relevant." His remarks broke the tension in the room like a blade. That's what it was. In a single quick motion, Scrappy's hand flew out, slapping Chaos' face sharply. The sound of the impact reverberated throughout the set, causing a loud crack that seemed to momentarily freeze everything in place. The crew, who had been filming with bated breath, gasped as Chaos' head snapped to the side, his face showing shock and sudden after a moment of uncontrolled shock. Fury swiftly collected himself. His eyes were burning with rage as he pounced at Scrappy, pushing past the security guards who had hurried to stop him. The camera zoomed in to capture the moment. There was no going back from the mayhem that was unfolding in real time at the UN, because the slap had started a fire that neither man appeared eager to put out. "Do you really think you can just smack me and get away with it?" His body tensed with anger, his fist clenched, and Chaos roared. "You've been running your mouth too long," Scrappy shot back, his voice thick with venom. "And now you see what happens when you don't know how to stop it." Scrappy kept his ground, his chest heaving with the adrenaline rush, his own wrath matching anarchy. Incredulously, the cast and crew were dispersed throughout the area, watching the two guys square up in quiet. Held back by security, the producers realized that the situation had escalated far beyond their original plan and promptly called for a break. The crew hurried to separate the men, pulling them in opposite directions in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. But even as the cameras continued to roll, the damage had already been done. The only thing breaking the silence was the sound of muffled shouts and harsh breathing, which made it clear that this was about respect and not just about the slap anymore. The slap served as a metaphor for everything that had been simmering beneath the surface between Scrappy and Chaos. the tension, rivalry, and power struggle. For Scrappy, the slap wasn't just an emotional outburst. It was a declaration that he wouldn't allow anyone, not even Chaos, to try to replace him or treat him disrespectfully in front of the world. The conflict may have ended for the time being, but it was obvious that their animosity was far from over. And as the cameras continued to document the aftermath, it became clear that Love and Hip Hop Atlanta had just experienced one of its most explosive moments yet. As he stood up, he saw a frightening calm descend upon him while the surrounding audience hummed with excitement. You could feel the tension in the air as Scrappy's muscles tensed. With a chip on his shoulder and a history of verbal altercations with the other cast members, Bambi, who was standing close by, could sense the storm building. She had heard disrespectful remarks from Chaos, and she knew her husband would not take it lightly. However, this time, the stakes were different, and Scrappy wasn't going to let anyone get away with it. Disdaining his spouse, not on stage, not in front of a crowd, and definitely not without consequences, Lil Scrappy, his patience running thin, stepped towards Chaos. The crowd started muttering, sensing what was about to happen, and Khaotic, still grinning, didn't back down. He was accustomed to being the center of attention, but he soon realized that the situation had unexpectedly escalated far beyond his expectations. A mixture of comfort and pride filled her face when Lil Scrappy lifted his hand and gave her a wild slap across the cheek. She had always known that Scrappy. The rest of the cast watched in stunned silence, some unsure of how to respond, others perhaps subconsciously relieved that someone had finally put Chaos in his place for Lil Scrappy. The message was clear: family first at all costs. The show went on, but the atmosphere had changed. There would never be a forgetting the slap that reverberated throughout the room, reminding everyone of how long Scrappy had stood up for her. As the camera zoomed out, the issue of how this would change the group dynamic going forward. Would he retaliate chaotically, or had he finally met his match in Lil Scrappy, remained in the air. Whatever transpired next, one thing was for sure: this drama was far from overly chaotic. He was accustomed to being the center of attention, but he soon realized that things had gotten much worse than he had anticipated. Nevertheless, she knew they had a bond that couldn't be broken, and something inside of her was stirred when she saw him defend her so vehemently. Be broken, and Scrappy's conduct at that precise time spoke louder than any words could. The remainder of the cast incredulously watched in quiet as some, unsure of how to respond, might have been secretly relieved that someone had finally replaced Lil Scrappy with Chaos. The message was clear: family first, no matter the cost. The show went on, but the mood had changed. As the cameras panned out, the slap that reverberated throughout the room served as a reminder of the lengths Scrappy would go to for those he loved. The question that lingered in the air was how this would change the dynamic of the group going forward. Would have retaliated in a disorderly manner, or had he finally faced Lil Scrappy? Whatever transpired next, there was little doubt that this drama was far from ended. You could feel the tension in the air as Scrappy's muscles tensed. Standing close by, Bambi sensed the storm building after hearing insulting remarks from Chaos, and she knew her husband would not take it well because Chaos was not unknown to him.